Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. Going to go right there. What are your boundaries? So impactful to live a better life, less stress, really honoring and respecting yourself when you have the right boundaries for those around you, situations and such. We're going to dig into that today with a fabulous therapist who helps people with this and so much more. By the way, she's also got a wonderful book called Emotional Healing Through Relationships, which we'll touch upon in just a few minutes. Audrey Palmer joins us here on the program. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you, Steve?
Just as good.
Good,
Very well.
good.
I
Thanks for having me today.
love having you back here. And this whole topic it's huge. It once you realize that you didn't have boundaries and once you put them up or define them, game changer in life. Let's start with what is a boundary? How do you define?
So there can be three different ways that we look at boundaries. They can be firm, flexible, or not there at all. And usually, when there's a rupture or disruption in the relationship, we realize that there were no boundaries to begin with. And so, when people have different expectations, they'll be at cross purposes. And so, if one is expecting a firm boundary and the other isn't, then you create problems. Let's take a simple issue as borrowing money. For some people, you never borrow or lend money to someone else. You can have serious financial boundaries or lack of boundaries. Someone continues to borrow without returning, and then resentment builds, anger builds, and before you know it, there is a rupture. And so when there's the reparative process, there's a need to go back and say, okay, these are my very clear boundaries. They're healthy. It's what's going to allow our relationship to flourish as we go. And sometimes it's necessary, Steve, to start with very firm boundaries until there's an establishment of the relationship and you get to know someone. And then you can loosen them a little and be more flexible. But
Hmm.
usually it's better to start with firm boundaries until people get to know one another.
Are boundaries the same as or similar to what your values are? If you would define who am I, does it come into play with boundaries?
Yes and no. And so you can have really good values that you think it's okay to help someone in financial need. I'll just stick to that because it's very understandable. So it's okay to help someone in financial need. You're a good person if you do that. You feel good about yourself. However, if the other person is constantly taking and never giving, and you find yourself on the anger end, and it's no longer a positive experience, it's one that's filling you with rage, then you haven't set clear boundaries. And so the values are good, and having good values is really helpful. But then you have to then set what are my boundaries? Because if you have someone who's constantly taking, never giving, or
Mm,
believing that they're entitled to everything you have, and you haven't firmly set your boundaries, then you create issues.
mm. That's certainly a wake up call once you start realizing, wait a minute, this person, all they do is keep taking. Or,
Hmm.
could even be right down to, somebody you're connected to and you connect with them, you talk with them. It's always about them. Well, they're talking about all their stuff. And I
Right.
bring up something about me and they don't even acknowledge it. They just keep going with themselves.
Right, right. So when I think about you're correct. Just having the awareness that it's a give and take in a relationship. It isn't just about the one person. My heart breaks every time that, the news comes on and women, especially older women, have been duped by someone they meet on the internet and they say,
Yes.
I'm in need or this or that, the other. And before you know it, they're out thousands of dollars because of one, lack of boundaries, but also desperation to connect with someone. And when you say no to someone who is a taker, they will find someone else. It's not about the relationship,
Yep.
it's about their own needs. As you say, everything is about them and not about anything else. It's not about the relationship.
Do you feel that the reason that we don't put up effective boundaries is essentially because we have issues. For example, let's say in what you just said, you have abandonment issues that go back to your childhood that you never confronted.
Hmm.
And maybe you're that older person. So you're trying to connect with somebody online. You find somebody, they hear you out, seems really good. They ask for money, classic scenario. Um, you don't want to lose them because you feel
Hmm.
abandoned. And okay, here's a credit card number. Do you think a lot of our not setting boundaries goes back to those limiting beliefs?
It's going to sound like a cliche and a broken record, but it really does go back to childhood. It goes back to trauma. It goes back to our need to feel affirmed, to feel that someone cares for us. And so if we just allow them um, to run roughshod over us and do whatever they want, it proves that they love us. There are women who will say, well, when he hurts me physically and he apologizes, it just shows how much he loves me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, 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 that's not love. There's confusion. It's not love. And so it's really clear to understand ourselves. But I have to go back a little bit. There are times that parents can end up in an enmeshed relationship with their child or with their children. Usually they pick one that they become totally enmeshed with, and that means there are no boundaries at all. That parent sees the child as an extension of who they are. And
Mm,
so if the child does something that they don't like, they're mortally wounded, and so offended. And sometimes we'll just stop speaking to the child because they expect that they will align with them completely. And the problem starts to happen when the young person, grow into adolescence and they start to have their own mind, their own thinking, their own relationships, and then the parent then becomes angry or even create situations to try and keep that enmeshed child with them. And so that child then learns, it becomes a learned behavior. In order to be with someone, I must be everything to them, and vice versa. So it goes back to youth, yes.
I want to ask you
Hmm.
the last time or the first time where you realized, wait a minute here. Uh, Personally, and going personal here, I need boundaries. There's no boundary here. Any
Right.
scenario situation that stands out for you?
For me personally,
Yeah.
actually, yes. So there's a financial piece where, you'll have relatives who are in constant need. And when you start adding up and it gets over into the thousands and you're talking about 20,000 plus, um, then you start saying, hang on a second. And so I've learned to really like the answer, the word no, without explanation, without apologies. It's
Yes.
just no.
No
And
is a complete sentence.
it's a complete sentence and it's so succinct, clear, and it leaves no room for confusion.
Mhm.
And sometimes we just have to say no because we don't then allow the other person to grow as a human being or as an adult when they believe that everything you have belongs to them as well. And so, yeah, I've had to set some very clear boundaries with one individual in my life, and where they call and say, "Oh, I'm really in need. Can I get, $2,000?" And the answer was simply no.
Hmm.
They moved on. They continued living, breathing. The sun rose the next day. The world did not end.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally get you. I
Yeah.
totally know what you're talking about. The money thing, been there, done that, even in the last year or so.
Right.
Trusting. It all resolved itself. And in that situation, and I didn't lend money. I just said, can keep this in a safe spot until I figure things. I, the relationship is better than ever,
Right.
and a long time relationship. And I feel that because boundaries were set up, and I was
Right.
always, I'm also always the one because they have little financial challenges. I was always the one that would pick up the tab,
Hmm.
or yeah, I'll get it this time, whatever.
Right.
Not no more.
Right. Right. Right.
And I remember a time in the spring of this year, I left here. It was right around 5 o'clock. I had a meeting at 7:30, and there's a small airport right around the corner. And I just got something to eat, drove there. I'm just a beautiful breeze coming in, just great scenery. Every once in a while, a plane. I could have went anywhere, but just different. And I'm sitting there and about to eat, and my phone rings, and I know who it was, and it's somebody who there's always challenge and also issues that they're going through.
Right.
And I'm like, all right, I'll pick it up. And I know what I was in for,
Right.
but after that call, it struck me boundary need to be set that when I'm setting time for myself, I don't, unless it's an obvious emergency and you've made it clear, I'm just not picking up the phone. I don't care
Right.
who it is.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned the phone. I'm going to mention a scripture in a second, but we've become so tethered to our phones
Mm,
that we believe we must answer them all the time.
yep.
You do not. You can call screen and just wait a minute. I just I see so often that couples get into squabbles and arguments because one needs to be on social media, the other is saying no, spend time with each other, and
Mm,
literally they are ending their relationship over the phone and the use of social media. And
yeah.
so again, it's setting boundaries. When do we have time as a couple? When do we have time for our relationship and not a relationship with the rest of the world? And
Mm,
what's interesting, so I'm not really big on Facebook, but I do have a page, and there was someone who posted something, and it was having a great time in Spain. And most people would look at that and think, I can't afford a Spanish vacation. So as I look closer, there they were floating on the ground. They had photoshopped themselves into a picture. It wasn't real. And I thought, how many people look at this and end up being envious or having issues because they can't afford what they think other people are affording? And so I do tell people sometimes put some boundaries around social media. Give
mm.
yourself vacation from it because it will help your mental health.
I've done that. And I have a marketing company. We do social for clients, blah, 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 and on and on. I don't post personally hardly ever unless
Right,
I feel it's something that somebody can benefit from.
right,
There's a reason. I'm not just gonna, here I am having a great time. Um, I just don't. And I found myself in the last few years adopting that more and
right.
more that I could just, I do a post about, no, no, I don't need to. It's okay. Nobody cares.
Right. And the question is, what is the purpose of this?
Right.
Is it just to brag or is it to share? If you have friends and families, you can just talk to them. There is no need to share it with the world. So the scripture that I want to talk about, because people are like, if people are Christians, why can't they be kind and just always give money? There is a passage that I love, and I tell it to people, neither a borrower or a lender be. Don't borrow, don't lend, learn contentment, learn to live within your means, but always strive to do better. And I think if we just adopt that very simple principle in life, where finances are concerned, we'd be
Mm,
better off, as people.
totally. Yeah. And that I believe brings it back to the notion that how much more do you need? Do you have enough to live your life and just be good? Just be good. Sure. Do we want more? Yes. Bring it on. No problem. However, at this point, are you okay? Everything's okay. I think most
Right,
people would say, yeah, a little challenge here, a little challenge there. But for the most part, we'd say, I got what I need. Sure, there's wants and needs,
right.
maybe define the difference. I wanted to share something with you.
Sure.
And it's so ironic about talking about sharing posts or putting up posts.
Right.
So I looked up here. The last post I did was about 10 days ago. And
Uh-huh.
and again, I only put up things that I feel are impactful, but it's so ironic. And this is what this was, I'm going to read it. You're going to laugh because it's
Okay.
in line with what we're talking about. OMG, this is totally me. How about you? The average American checks their phone around 5 times per episode while watching TV and can't make it 15 minutes in before they're bored and want to multitask.
Yeah.
And so many people, commented on it. like how many times they do it. Somebody just said, yeah, that's just about everybody. That's true. It's like my fifth limb. But I don't post unless I think it'll make people think. And how
Right,
funny it was about the phone.
right, right.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so but really setting clear boundaries around some things. So if you're out to dinner with a friend or with your family, does the phone come to the table? Is the phone at the dinner table? When you're at a gathering, sometimes I look around the room and everyone's got the phone and they're texting each other or someone else somewhere else. And so, how do you then set boundaries and connect with people who are there present with you?
Hmm.
And it comes down to once we can clearly set some of these boundaries, we can have a better relationship. As you said with your friend who you had clear boundaries with, the relationship strengthened because they knew your limits and you
Yeah.
knew theirs as well. Yeah.
Do you think, Audrey, a lot of times that we don't set boundaries is because we don't want to offend and also because of guilt?
Yes, those who are asking or always asking are very good at pushing those guilty buttons, especially if you've known each other for a long time or if you're family members. They are good at pushing those buttons, which is why they're always the askers or the takers. And sometimes people feel like they have achieved more than someone else, so they feel guilty. Um, I want to say that, oh, maybe I shouldn't. I was going to say this respectfully, but there's no way to do it. Sometimes people experience white guilt. Even Black people experience white guilt when they go to visit a poorer country and they think, oh my gosh, why do I have so much? I should give them what I have. And you end up giving more than you should, which is not okay because people are probably content in their home with their lives and what they're doing, while you're just feeling guilty because you've worked hard and
Mm.
achieve what you have.
I think even the guilt comes into play when it's relatives, even your kids. You know, they may ask for things, and I think there should be boundaries up in any situation, but you kind of squash it down that thought because of guilt.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of things come into play that get in the way when it comes to putting up your boundaries.
Right. There can also be, talk about emotional boundaries. Do you allow someone, and this kind of feeds right into guilt, do you allow someone to take advantage of you emotionally, or to sabotage you, or to undermine you because you don't have boundaries? And so they'll show up at midnight wanting to
Mm,
to party when you have a young child and you need to go to work the next day. And
yeah.
so they keep pushing those boundaries. And how do you then say, look, this is my limit? When we were growing up, we had one friend whose father would not allow phone calls into the home after 9 p.m. Now, I thought that was a little drastic, but that was her reality. And so some of the things that we did as teenagers, she couldn't do because there was a very strict limit on what they could do. It set up healthy boundaries for that family. But I thought it was a little rigid, more than flexible to allow kids to grow. But that
Hmm.
father had a clear idea of what he wanted for his home, whereas lots of parents these days have no idea, and so they let anything happen. Um, One of the, just a side note, when I work with teenagers, I'm surprised that they want boundaries. They are
Yeah.
always surprised when their parents just let them do whatever they want, and parents, they perceive that as not caring for them. So the fight's going to happen. Don't expect that it's not going to happen, but they welcome it because they know they
Yeah.
need limits.
100%. I'm glad you said that. And it's not even just teenagers, children,
Yes,
teens all need boundaries. They may
absolutely.
not like it, they may push
No,
back, but deep inside, they need it, they want it. They don't have any direction. You're the
right.
parent. Yeah,
Yes,
great point.
absolutely. And speaking of being a parent, lose this phrase, I want to be friends with my kids. if you parent them effectively, they will be able to find their own friends. If you don't have friends, that's your issue that you need to deal with. But you can't be friends with your kids. They don't have the capacity for friendship with mom and dad. They need direction, clarity, consistency, all those things. And so lose that phrase, please. It's created just, I think, a generation of entitled kids who have no idea what it means to be bounded.
I'm glad you said that. And quite honestly, I was thinking it before you said it. I
Okay.
really mean that. You can't be a parent and a friend at the same time. There's maybe
Right.
a little bit of fun in there that you could call friendship, but
Hmm.
you're a parent.
Yeah.
That's the way it is. Wonderful. Um,
Yeah, and when they get older, you can be friends with your adult children,
sure.
but keep in mind they're always going to see you as mom or dad, not as the buddy down the street.
100%.
Right.
Audrey, what's the best way to find you?
So you can visit my site, genesisclinicalservices.ca. There's also a QR code that you can scan that'll take you right there. And the book is on Amazon. So I hope that you pick it up. Emotional Healing Through Relationships.
Great book, great concept. We've talked about it before. And so glad that we talked about boundaries because it's so important and we don't realize it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Be care. Good.
You
Take
too.
care.
We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.